Welcome back to Three Men and a Mystery. I'm one of the three men, John Lorden.
And this is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
Today we're going to learn about who Elisa was, and what better person to help us with that than her mother, Judy. I've had the honor of getting to know Judy and Elisa's sister, Angela, over the past several months. They've both given us extensive interviews going into numerous aspects about this case, and we'll be presenting that as this season progresses. Personally, I've always worked hard to focus on the victims in the cases that I cover. I see a lot of media that seems to focus very strongly on suspects and perpetrators. I'm sure you guys have noticed that as well. What do you think are some of the benefits to focusing more on the victims than the perpetrators?
Well, I think that personally, the victims' families, their friends are usually going to be the biggest advocates for that victim. And they're going to help in whatever way they can, whether it's coming on to talk with you, helping clear things up, trying to share the story, get it out there. So I think you usually get that approach that people are willing to help and are more open to talking with you and helping you tell that story.
Yeah, and you deal with this a lot with the murder in my family, right? I mean,
yeah, it's something where people are usually looking for some kind of help and some kind of platform, and they're willing to come on and put themselves out there to do that and get that message out there.
Gray, do you think that one is better than the other when you're talking about maybe content that focuses on the victim and the victim's family versus, there's still stories being produced about Charles Manson out there and Ted Bundy and kind of focusing more on the perpetrator. What do you think?
Well, it seems like a case like this, that is it a suicide or was she murdered? You need to look into who she was. So you got to look into her past, get all the information about her to determine the likelihood of her actually killing herself. And I think a case like this, it's absolutely essential to look at her past and looking to see if it's even something she would do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like there's a forensic, a psychology aspect to a case like this that becomes important. So that's why we're going to spend so much time with her mother, Judy, going into all this. Personally, I think it's also important to remember that the families are quite often victims in these things as well. Yes, we kind of think of a victim as, oh, that's the person that actually died, but the ripple that happens through the family. And I'm seeing this firsthand when I'm dealing with Judy and Angela. This is pain that they've been dealing with for years. And it's consuming, for Judy in particular, it's consuming a lot of her life. She's been running her own investigation basically since this thing started. I think it's really important to try to be an advocate for them, to try to help them through, getting a better understanding with all this. It's just, those lives have been forever altered. And of course, Elisa has ended, but her sister and her mother will never be the same as well. Just to make it all a bit easier to understand in this next segment, I just want to give everyone a quick rundown of who's who and other things that Elisa's mother, Judy, will be addressing. Elisa's sister is Angela. Elisa herself has 3 children. She has her daughter, Jade, who was actually a witness at the wedding. And she has her son, Jesse, who serves in the military. Both of her children those 2 children are adults. But Elisa also wanted to help a couple that could not have their own children. She became a surrogate mother. But unfortunately, that didn't go quite as she planned, and we'll hear more about that directly from Judy. There's also a reference in here to MCAD, which is the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and one of the biggest art projects in Elisa's life was working on a mural for the U.S. Bank Stadium, and that's where the Vikings play. It's a newer stadium out here in Minneapolis. So with all that being said, here's Judy to tell us more about her daughter, Elisa.
I'm Judy Hunt. I'm Elisa's mother. Elisa was born June 20th, 1969. That pregnancy was, she came very fast in the middle of the night. And otherwise, it was a very easy pregnancy.
What was Elisa like as a child?
Oh, she was so sweet and such a cute little girl. She was compassionate right from the start. She was just a sweet little girl. She was raised in Minneapolis, Hopkins, mainly Hopkins, Minnesota.
We learned that the family went through a breakup at some point. Did that affect her a lot when she was younger?
Well, I think it affects all children, but she was pretty little when my husband and I split up. So I don't think a whole lot, but every child is affected by divorce.
Yeah. What was your favorite moment from Elisa's childhood?
Well, there were so many, but the girls were in dance from 3 years old, and she was in a lot of dance recitals. And one recital, she was, I believe, about 3.5, and it was a powder puff dance. And little girl next to her sat on her powder puff, and she didn't like that. I think she punched her. And so at the end of the recital, she said, the dance teacher told her, she said, "Well, Elisa, you stole the show again." She was a determined little girl right from day one. And she was pretty stubborn. But she was always had so much going in her mind. And she was just like a little ball of fire.
Yeah. Did she get that from her father?
Probably both of us.
What was the toughest part of Elisa's early years?
I think probably the toughest part was that I had to work quite a bit and I wasn't home, that much. And I think that was hard on Elisa, both my girls. I was a single mom, and so I had to work a lot. And so that's really hard on children.
Yeah. What type of work were you in?
I worked at a warehouse for office furniture, and I managed the showroom.
When did you notice that Elisa had artistic talent? When did you first see that?
Well, I knew she was creative, but when she was about 7 or 8, maybe 9, she saw an article in the paper where you drew a picture of peanuts for Charles Schultz. And she asked me if she drew it, if I would send it in to him. And I said, sure. So she drew it and I sent it in to him. And sure enough, he wrote back and said, "You should continue your life in art because you're talented, very talented."
When did you learn that she was also an animal lover?
Very early on. She used to watch she watched the ants on the sidewalk. She invited the ducks in, and she was always wanted animals around her.
What did you think about the duck incident?
Oh, well, of course I was not real happy about it because there were feathers and duck feces all over the living room. But knowing Elisa, you just had to just love it, She had she just loved every animal that came her way.
What's the first thing that you remember Elisa saying she wanted to do when she grew up?
Well, she wanted to do a lot of things. She wanted to be a dancer. She wanted to be an artist. She was a busy girl. She had a lot of things in her that she wanted to accomplish. She was always creating different things, and she liked to act. She would put on puppet shows, and she would always had a lemonade stand and different things like that. Elisa's favorite place to go, I think she had a few, but one of them was always the Animal Humane Society. In fact, when she was about, I think, 9 or 10, she called the Humane Society up because they were having a dog walk, and she registered herself. And the next day I was getting ready for work, and I got a call, and this lady said, "Okay, we'll be there to pick you two up to go on the walk in an hour," or something like that. And I said, "Who is this and what walk?" And she said, "This is from the Humane Society. Elisa's going on the walk." And I said, "Well, that's news to me. Let me talk to Elisa." So here, I found out she had signed herself up. And so I told the woman, I said, I cannot go. I have to work. And she said, well, would you mind if we took her with us? I said, no. So she went on that walk, and they took a big picture of her. And that was really something.
What was Elisa like as a teenager? We know teenage years can be tough.
Yeah.
What was she like in teenage years?
Oh, she was so determined about everything. She was difficult at times, like all kids are, but my girls were both really pretty good. I didn't have a lot of trouble with either one of them. She was a good girl.
Was there any particular way that she would act out? Was it boy trouble? Was it sneaking out? Was it bad grades or any?
Not boy trouble. It was crazy things she wanted to do. Like she wanted to go to New York and be a dancer, and she wanted to do this, and she wanted to do that, and she wanted to go over to the pet store and bring all these pets home, and it was just things like that.
Sounds like she was a big dreamer right from the start.
She was.
What's your favorite memory from the teenage years with Elisa?
From the teenage years, she was in high school, and she was having a little bit of trouble with her grades because she wasn't getting her homework in. And so she had to do some time in summer school. And for summer school, she was in the drama club, and she was the princess in Princess and the Pea. And so there was a scout from Children's Theater in the audience. And after the play, they came up to me and said they really wanted Elisa to audition at Children's Theater. And she auditioned, and she went to Children's Theater for the rest of her school year. The toughest part, I think, Elisa wanted to do a lot of things, and I just couldn't do it, couldn't afford it or whatever, but she had big ideas on everything. And she just had this energy that didn't quit.
What was Elisa's first job?
She was a counselor at a camp, and it was, if I remember correctly, the camp was Camp Rio. It was her first job, and it was for challenged kids. And she did really well there. They just loved her. She did that 2 summers.
Now, when do you remember Elisa starting dating? Which I know might be different from when it actually happened.
Yeah. Parents are the last to know when their kids are dating, right? But Elisa started dating at the end of her high school years.
Okay.
As far as I know.
And do you remember her first boyfriend?
Yes. Her first boyfriend was Philip.
And do you remember anything in particular about Philip or that relationship?
I remember that Philip was pretty shy and kind of artsy himself, and quiet in every way, and just a real nice kid.
And what happened there? How did it come to an end?
Oh, they were young, and it just fizzled out. Her biggest accomplishment absolutely was her children. And she would get her children in. She had Jess in theater. She had Jade in piano lessons. And she worked for a little while at some type of it wasn't a nursing home, but it was some kind of a center. And she would bring the kids in to entertain for the people. And she just put everything into those kids.
What was Elisa doing towards the end of her life? What was she doing for work?
Elisa she was an art teacher at Sejong Academy, and she was going to MCAD, and she was an artist, or an upcoming artist, I should say. She was only 2 months away from graduation. She was going to graduate in December of 2016. They did graduate her. They brought the family in. They roped off a row of seats for us. And I received I received her diploma. That was her lifelong dream.
Yeah. Yeah. How was her feelings? Did she ever talk to you about the work at the academy? How did she feel about that job at the Sujong?
Oh, Elisa loved her job at the academy, and they loved her. After Elisa died, they dedicated a wall to her. But she loved it, and she used to call me up all the time and say, Mom, can you donate any art supplies, because we're always short? And do you know anybody that can? I said, yeah, I can get some together. So we were always getting art supplies together for the academy. She also taught, not art, but she taught dance at the YMCA. And Elisa was honored there. And Elisa was asked to come for the Nobel Peace Prize when that was taking place in Minneapolis, I guess. And then also one other way Elisa was honored was, of course, at the Bank Stadium for the mural. And she met with Carl Eller, and it was quite an honor. As an adult, she was very busy. Like I said before, she had so much energy. And she had as much energy as 10 people. And she was always trying to rope people in to go along with her on all these different rescue things she was doing for animals. And she was just, she always had something going all the time.
Did she talk to you about her desires to be a surrogate mother?
She did. And I was pretty skeptical about it because I knew Elisa. I knew how compassionate she was. And I could foresee some problems with the surrogacy since it was a part of her. And I really, I kind of tried to talk her out of it, but she was set on it, to helping this couple out. And there were promises made that were broken. I was at the hospital when the baby was born. I held that child myself. And I'm a grandmother, but I've never been able to see her or hold her again. So Elisa, it was a very hard time for Elisa.
So I know that there was some legal processes that were going on around the time that she passed away. What can you describe those for us?
Yes.
What was she trying to do?
Elisa was trying, in the beginning, they had offered to share custody with Elisa. And they told all of us that well, not all of us, but me and Jade and Jess, that we would always be in her life, the little girl's life. And they told Jade and Jess, she'll be at your baseball games, she'll be here, she'll be there, she'll always be a part of your life. Well, when Elisa left the hospital, they dropped her off and took the little girl and went home, and Elisa was not able to see her again. So she had to go through the legal aspect to try to get to see her. And the real sad thing is that we went through a whole lot. I was with her all the time, and we really went through a lot to get visitation. And she was about to get that November of 2016. And she died a month before that court date.
So a lot to unpack in that first section of clips. First of all, I think it's pretty amazing that Elisa was the type of person that wanted to help animals and help other people. And to do all that, she would ask for help. And it's almost like she encouraged these people around her to also step up, with her efforts to help people. I think it's just a testament for all of us out there that are trying to help others that there's like a ripple effect that can happen, and you can inspire other people to help as well. And I think that's amazing. Did you guys have some takeaways that you wanted to touch on from that?
I was going to ask that when was the surrogacy? Was that how much prior to? I mean, was that just the year before, or
No,
was it a few years back?
No. This had been an ongoing process. I believe this. We're talking like possibly 10 years before.
So the little girl is probably 9 or 10 years old at this point.
I believe so. So. Yeah. More?
Yeah, it's just it's really enlightening. When you read somebody's name in a newspaper and you hear they were found dead and you don't really get to know them, that's why when you have these people that open up, you learn more about that person. You feel like you get to know them a little bit instead of just reading a quick blurb in the newspaper. And I think that in a case like this where we're talking about her and what might have happened to her, I think it's just very invaluable to have the family's insights to help us get to know her.
Yeah. It starts, and for me, also spending time with them is giving me some insight, because these are two very strong, very tough women that I've been dealing with. I've seen them in some pretty trying situations, and they don't back down. They're both very, very strong. We're going to hear more about her mom's character when it comes to that. And we did interview her sister also. We won't be getting into that in this episode, but we will hear from her later in the series. Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you wonder, well, hold on. These women that are so strong are telling us that Elisa was even stronger than them, essentially. And how could that person make that type of decision to end her own life? It already brings up a question.
It seemed like she was very, very ambitious.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was incredible. And then very talented artistically, and it seemed like a very good mom. I mean,
and
accomplished.
Lessons. And accomplished. So many different accomplishments and ways that she's been honored. The last thing that is essentially her Facebook page is now a memorial page, and the last post that's on there is her, graduating. So yeah, it's there's a lot that you definitely get, and I really appreciate Judy sharing all that with us. When it comes to the surrogacy, Elisa left a bit of a digital footprint about her issues with surrogacy. She signed petitions, she wrote statements, and she was really trying to encourage some changes into how effective surrogacy-based contracts are. She was also looking to collaborate with other artists that had experienced similar struggles. Judy is convinced Elisa would have received some form of visitation as she was originally promised, if she actually made it to that court date in November. So it kind of adds to the heartbreak of all this as well.
And we'll be right back after this quick break.
A lot of us struggle with finding happiness, dealing with tough life issues, and so much more. But you don't have to struggle alone, and you don't even have to leave your home to get the help you need, thanks to BetterHelp Online Counseling.
BetterHelp is available on desktop or mobile for both Android or iOS. You can speak to a counselor via text, chat, phone, or video.
Find secure, convenient, professional help that's affordable with BetterHelp.
BetterHelp isn't a crisis line, but you can find licensed professional counselors that you can speak to from the comfort of your own home.
3 Men and a Mystery listeners get 10% off your first month with discount code 3MEN. So why not get started today? Go to betterhelp.com/3men. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. That's betterhelp.com/3men. Find help to break through those personal obstacles with BetterHelp. Welcome back, and please keep in mind that our sponsors are helping us raise funds that will go towards investigating this case further and honoring the life of Elisa Gomez. So please show them the same support they're showing us. I also want to give a very big thank you to BetterHelp for essentially sponsoring this whole season. Let's continue with Judy telling us about Elisa's love life, children, and of course, some more about her art.
I believe that Elisa wanted to be married her whole life, for sure. And she met the wrong person, is what happened.
How would you describe her love life before Brad?
She had Elisa dated one person for 15 years on and off. And she felt that he was her soulmate. But he was not a person that wanted to get married. But they were together for a long time. And then they broke up because she wanted to get married. He didn't want to get married. And she sent him, I found a letter that she had written to him. It was about a 3-page long letter after she died, and I gave it to him, but I took a copy of it, and it was really, really a nice letter. She told him she understood, what he wanted in life and what she understood, but she always felt that they were meant to be together and that it was her soulmate. And it was a great letter. They did split up, and he had a very hard time with her death. Real hard time.
How?
I talked to him on the phone quite often. I met him, and he felt so guilty for not getting married to her. And he was really tore up about Elisa. Jade was born April 5th, 1988, and Jess was born October 18th, 1994.
And how are they dealing with all this?
Well, Jade had a terrible time with it. She saw her mom being put in a body bag that morning. So she is just starting to come around now. She dealt with so much. And Jess, he's 24 years old and doesn't have a mom to call. They're such great kids. And my heart breaks for them constantly. Elisa, I think everybody struggles with depression now and then, but she wasn't a depressed person. When she was having problems like with the surrogacy, that girl went to work. She got on the internet looking for ways to solve problems. She just researched everything. And when she was having trouble, she went out and fought whatever was coming her way. She just was not a person that would go lay in bed for a day or something because she was depressed. She just wasn't. She was a fighter.
And you never knew her to get caught up in drugs or alcohol throughout her life?
I never had any problems with Elisa at all when she was younger, and through her adulthood, no. I've never, she would go to a party or whatever, but she had no trouble with drugs or alcohol.
What do you think about her work at US Bank Stadium?
Oh, I just thought it was great. When she first started the work at the US Bank Stadium, they were doing mock-ups, and she called me up and she said, "Would you like to come and see the mock-ups?" She said, "We're not supposed to show them to anybody, but they've said they'll let you in." So I said, "Well, Lisa, that's great, but I live 2.5 hours north." She said, "Oh, can't you do it?" And I said, "All right." So on my way down, I went, and she was just having a great time with it. They were giving her all the detail work because she was really good at it, and she worked her heart out on that. They worked hours and hours every day, and it was quite something when it was done. And not only that, but Jess was in Out on a Limb dance company, and he was in a lot of productions, and she was always on the stage crew painting. I honestly do not know where that girl found the time to do all this, but I couldn't keep up with her. But she painted there, she painted here, everywhere. She was just unbelievable.
Well, I have a feeling I know where she got her work ethic from. I mean, you're a single mom raising 2 girls,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, I sure was.
Yeah. Which of Elisa's art pieces is your personal favorite?
My personal favorite of her art pieces is absolutely her Baryshnikov, because it was, she won first place on that, but it's amazing. It really is. And being that she was interested in dance and taught dance, and so it really meant a lot.
What are your thoughts on her last piece, Silenced?
My thoughts on that, I know it's about the surrogacy, because Elisa had, confided in me about it. I'm not sure if she was done with that piece, because just before she died, she had called me up and told me that she was really getting close for her work on her last piece for graduation. So I don't think she was done with that. I really don't. But I do know it was about the surrogacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of how short the time frame was with her and Brad's relationship, it couldn't have been a comment on that, right? That was
No.
all too fast.
I don't believe that at all, because she had called me up and she said, Mom, she said, my life, this was just a few weeks before she died, a couple of weeks maybe. She said, my life is finally coming together. I'm almost done with my senior project. She said, I'm just bought a new car. She said, I won't have to, when I graduate, I won't have to have renters anymore. She said, everything is really looking good and going my way. And I'm in a relationship, and we're planning to get married in April. And she was so happy. It was just, when I got that call, I couldn't believe it. That was just 2 weeks before that she called me up and told me how happy she was.
So Jade, from what I understand, is already just a bit shy, just in terms of her nature. And recently I did get an email from Judy saying that Jade is willing to talk. She won't be interviewed essentially for the show or anything like that. But I will be reaching out to her. I imagine it has to be extremely tough on her, because she wound up being a witness for her mother's wedding. And then literally the next morning she was supposed to go meet her mom for breakfast. And like Judy said, Jade is watching her mother carried out in a body bag instead. So I know that young woman has been put through some very, very tough things. So what do you guys think about information from that clip?
It just sounds like a very promising life that was just cut short. And it just, it really paints a picture of what her family's dealing with, as far as, like you just mentioned, going from one extreme of my mom's getting married to the next day she's being carried out in a body bag. And it just seems like she had so much going for her and so much she was looking forward to, which just makes the case even that much more confusing.
Yeah, she was also kind of just like it seems like she had so much energy and she was affecting so much around her that once she's not alive anymore, I imagine that it's very strange for people that are really close to her, because they're used to that. They're used to, what's Elisa doing this week? What dogs is she rescuing? Or, what do we have to do to keep her, to keep supporting her efforts on all this? And then all of a sudden, all that's just gone. And there's just this hole that's left. So, especially for someone that active and with that much energy, I think it really hits the family strongly. What do you think, Gray?
Yeah, I mean, the mother was saying that she's not a depressed person. And basically it sounds like she's a fighter in life, right? Like when the surrogacy didn't go the way that was promised, she fought, okay? And then she also said that things were really coming together for her. Everything was great. And then it seems like one thing that I noticed is that she's really focused in on being married.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it wasn't necessarily getting married to the right person. It was just
Right.
being married. So I think definitely picked the wrong guy there.
Yeah, there has to be some truth about that, and her mom's pretty direct about that. That Elisa pretty much always wanted to get married. I think a lot of women have that picture in their mind. What's my wedding dress going to look like? What's that day going to look like? How special is it going to be? And to your point, obviously this was an accelerated relationship. She really only knew this guy for less than 2 months. Yeah, maybe it was just he was the one there at the right time, and she was going to, walk him down the aisle. I don't know. So Judy's now going to bring us up to speed on the living arrangements that were happening at Elisa's home and what she heard from her roommate Sharon after Elisa's death.
Elisa moved into the house on Cedar. I think she was there about 16 years, so quite a while ago.
And what type of arrangement was this? Was she buying it or?
It was she worked out a contract for deed on the house. Elisa had a roommate, Sharon Vestal, that lived at her house. And Bradley Alexander had just moved in. And Elisa. And that was all. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs in her house. And then she had converted the basement into a bedroom also.
And that's where she slept.
Oh, I take that back. She had another roommate. Jeff McDaniels was also, he was a new roommate. He was living in the house also.
Was he there on the night of her passing?
No, he wasn't. He was not there. He was at his grandmother's funeral. And I might be wrong on his first name. I know it was McDaniels. It could be Jake. It's either Jake or Jeff. But when he got back, he had to cut his trip short because Sharon called him and told him about Elisa. I don't know what she said to him. So he cut his trip short and he came back, and because of whatever Sharon told him, he got a police escort to the house. And when he got into the house, he went up to his room and everything of his had been gone through. And anything of value was stolen. And everything else was just trashed all over the floor. But yet he noticed none of Bradley's things were taken. So he left right away and he didn't come back.
Okay. Do you know how long Elisa had known Sharon?
Not very long. I don't think very long, maybe a few months, because I had never met Sharon. I don't know, maybe more, but I don't think so.
Did Elisa ever talk to you about Sharon or what their relationship was like?
The only thing she had said to me is she had a renter. She had a couple of renters, and she didn't tell me anything about Sharon.
So this isn't someone that was like a friend of hers from before that you heard of for years and then came and moved in with her?
No, I don't think so. I think Sharon was probably a friend of a friend, and Elisa was just helping her out. Elisa was using her rental income to help pay her tuition at school.
In October of 2016, where are Jade and Jess?
Jade was living in southeast Minneapolis. Jess had just come back from the military. He had just come back from Kuwait, actually. And he was about to see his mother the next week because it was his birthday. And Jade had plans to see her mother that morning for a breakfast date. I spoke to Sharon when we went to the house after we learned of Elisa's death. And Angela, I believe, was downstairs. I went upstairs and I knocked on Sharon's door. And Sharon opened the door and I said, Sharon, I looked at her right in the eyes and point blank, I said, did Brad do this to Elisa? Did he murder her? And she said, yes, he did. with tears running down her face. The last time I spoke to her, I didn't speak to her. It was in a text message. I asked her about the wedding dress because it was missing. And that was a year ago, maybe longer. I did not find Sharon to be helpful at all. As a matter of fact, very frustrating. She was a frustrating person because she would call me up and tell me how sorry she was. And I knew she was afraid of Brad because she was threatened by him. And she sent that to me in a text message. And she would call me up and tell me that she was going to different rehab centers. And when she was there, I could come and she would talk to me and tell me all about that evening. And she mentioned one that was called RCC. And she said she was going to take her girls there also. And I could come there and she'd talk to me. Well, then I found out there was no such place, and she didn't go to any rehab center at all. And this is how it went with her, back and forth, constantly.
So she always offered to bring you more information, but there was never a real opportunity.
No. Mm-mm.
Wow.
And she kept texting me like a couple times a week how sorry she was. And later, I decided it was how guilty she was. I'm not saying about the murder, but about not helping. Sharon told the police one time when Jade, Jess, it was Sergeant Jensen, and Jess's father, Mickey, were all present, and Sharon, and she told them that Brad did kill her. And then she changed her story right away.
So the authorities have heard two different stories from her.
Yes, but they didn't care.
Would she have any reason to lie about Brad's involvement? Would she have any reason to get back at him? Do you know if they had a relationship before?
I don't know if that Brad and Sharon had any type of relationship, but people have speculated on that. But I believe that Sharon had two little girls. And I know that he threatened her. And my only thinking on the whole thing, the way she acted all the time, is that maybe he threatened also her little girls. Because as a mother, you're going to protect your children. So that came to my mind quite a bit. But I do know he threatened her for sure.
I have also seen photos of a social media post where Sharon is saying that Bradley is the person that killed her friend and she wants someone to throat punch him. So it's strange. We've got several times where she's saying that he is responsible for doing this, but then ultimately changes her story with the authorities. Do you guys think that we could even trust Sharon if we could get a chance to talk to her?
Usually for me personally, when I look at these kind of cases and somebody changes their story over time, I tend to believe what they said initially since it was fresh in their mind. I tend to lean with that, but I also consider, was that person drinking? Were they intoxicated? And now thinking back later on with a clear head that they were wrong about something. But I think Elisa's mom said something interesting, that she was going to rehabs, and whether it turned out to be true or not, if she had some kind of dependency issues, could that have affected her thinking back there? And she also said another interesting thing, that she was afraid of Brad. So I could see somebody that's afraid of someone going silent or not wanting to get on their bad side. And if that's true, then that could be a reason she's changed her story too.
It is worth noting, I know we haven't gone into his background on the podcast yet, but we've been looking into records and stuff, and he has some records for attacking women in particular, and he's even served time for it. Gray, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, what Judy was saying about the guilt, that's exactly what was going through my mind. Every time that that Sharon would call and text. It was to satisfy the guilt of her original statement, which she said was that Brad had murdered Elisa. And then I was also thinking that that since Sharon is in rehab, she probably doesn't have her children. I wouldn't think. And so that maybe if she doesn't have her children in that house, which I don't know if she did or not, maybe that's the threat that Brad made to her, because he would know that she was doing drugs perhaps when she shouldn't be, and maybe would not get custody back. So perhaps that's a threat that he was making.
Could be a different type of threat. Yeah, her children were with her. That's part of the story is one of the interesting aspects is her aunt comes over to pick up one of her children, and I've actually heard in an interview that a detective did with that aunt, and they specifically asked, were any police there when you showed up to pick the other child? And she said no. So it kind of leads you to believe, did Sharon call the aunt before she called the police? It's a real strange order of events if this is kind of an emergency medical services effort, which it does appear to be, especially from the body cam footage we see. We've got firefighters responding. They're trying, essentially to save Elisa's life at that point. So yeah, a bit of strangeness. But you make a really good point. The threat doesn't necessarily have to be a physical threat, although wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for this guy based on his criminal history. But it could be more of a family-driven threat. Yeah,
it could be that the. She has custody now, but what if he was threatening, I'll make sure you lose your children?
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Of course, the other person, the guy we keep kind of dancing around, is Bradley Alexander. Judy's going to share with us how Elisa met Brad and what were her initial impressions of him.
Did Elisa ever explain to you how she met Brad?
She did. She told me that she had put a posting on Craigslist asking for some muscle, some help. And Brad answered that. And she hired him for a few odd jobs and help with the dog walking. So at the time, he was living with a girl in an apartment. And he saw an opportunity, and he never went back to that apartment. He just put the play there for Elisa, and he was moved into her house very shortly. She met him, I believe it was like August 28th, something like that. And I heard about him first part of September. And then towards the end of September, she told me that their relationship was moving along pretty speedily, and they were thinking about getting married. And then I met them for lunch. And he was very quiet. He didn't talk much. I didn't find anything, he was dressed real nice that day, and I didn't find anything that I was suspicious of that day. She got up and went to the restroom, and I asked him questions. He told me he was a mechanic, which he wasn't. And so I asked him a lot of questions about cars, and he seemed to know everything about a car. And so I just didn't, I was worried about that it was moving so quickly, but I didn't see anything in him that I was worried about him. So when she called me and told me they got married, she said that they were planning a wedding in April. And then she had mentioned at that time that he wanted to get married sooner. And I said, no, Elisa, I said, that it's just too fast. I said, you've always wanted a big wedding, so let's plan it for April, and you can have that big wedding that you've always wanted, and I'll talk to your dad and we'll figure out a reception. And so she said, yeah, that's a good idea, because I shouldn't get married before the court date for the surrogacy anyway. And so her dad and I were planning the reception. I went down to the Richfield Legion to look at for the reception. She had talked to a client of hers, and they were going to get married in their yard on April 21st, the following year. So she would call me periodically and talk to me about dresses and, things about the wedding. And I was fine with it because I thought if there was anything, knowing Elisa, if there was anything wrong with this guy, she would see the red flags and she'd drop them like right now. And that didn't happen, so I was just going along with it for April. So when I got the call that they got married October 10th in the afternoon, I about fell off my chair. And my heart just sunk. And she said to me, I was living in Isle, and so I had a landline and a cell phone. And my sister-in-law actually was on the landline with me. I was talking to her, and Elisa was on the cell phone. So my sister-in-law heard the whole conversation. And I said, Elisa, why? And she said, well, Brad talked me into it. He was afraid I was going to get away from him. And he also talked me into changing my name right away. And I said, why didn't you tell anybody? I was just sick. And she said, well, don't worry, Mom. We're going to have that big wedding. So don't worry. She said, so don't tell anybody. And I said, well, I've got Candy on the other line. And she said, Aunt Candy, don't tell anybody because we're going to still have that big wedding in April. And she said it was his idea. He wanted me to change my name immediately. But I had a sick feeling in my stomach about it. But she sounded so happy, so what do? It's your daughter, So then I got the call the next day.
So that's as much as we're going to hear from Judy today, but that's only about half of the interview that I actually did with her. So we will certainly be getting into much more information with her in a later episode. What'd you guys think? What's the biggest takeaway that you got from hearing from her today?
I think I personally was able to get a real sense from Judy about Elisa's state, her life, what was going on, and to me, it just sounds like she had all these things going for her, but maybe at the same time she was lonely. So meeting this guy at that time that she did, I wonder if she maybe let down her guard a little bit, or to impress him, or to kind of cater to him, agree to certain things. And it just goes back to something we talk about, probably all of us in different cases we cover on different shows, that sometimes when you let people in your life and your home that you don't really know, whether it's meeting them on the internet because you put an ad on there to rake your leaves, or because you're looking for a love connection, whatever it is, I think we have to be careful that we don't really know those people. We haven't met them the way we typically would and get to know them. So I wonder if some of that was at play for Elisa.
Yeah, I thought what I got from it was that Elisa was a great person. And then she met a guy named Brad who seemed to be really a scammer. I mean, I really just listening to it sounds like he comes in there, gets her to change the name. They barely met, and everything's on his terms. And then things went really wrong, and they went really wrong really quickly. And you have Sharon who's saying, "Hey, listen, Brad killed her," and it's like, who's doing anything about that? She said it to Judy, and she said it to the police. Have they ever leaned on her? Have they got her in a room and just really sat there and got her to give that information? I mean, what was the answer to the question of, well, how do you know that he killed her?
Right. Well, thankfully, we do have the detective interviewing Sharon, and we are going to be listening to that tape very soon here on the show as well. Maybe we can get some answers from that. The main thing I'm still bothered by is the acceleration of the wedding. The logic for that isn't there. There's this version that I've heard from Judy, and I believe we're going to hear another version once we start looking into materials on Brad, where they went down to the courthouse to get their license, but they didn't intend on getting married. But they found out the license was only good for 6 months, and it wasn't going to cover to where their actual wedding date was, which was the date that Judy mentioned. I don't believe that's true because I've seen pictures of them at the courthouse, and she's wearing her wedding dress. So it's very clear to me that at the time that they were going to the courthouse, at least she had the foresight of knowing, I better get made up because I'm getting married today. So there's something about that, and I know from Judy's perspective and Angela, Elisa's sister's perspective, this all looks really strange, and it seems like a mechanism for, is this guy trying to rip her off? You know, I need to get her married, and then she needs to die, and then everything's going to become mine. That's kind of the simple theory that we're looking at here. And a thing that I really struggle with is how do you justify this? How do you make sense out of, we're planning a wedding for April, we're only in October, I've only known you for 2 months. Hey, let's just go do it. And by the way, change your name. Yeah, let's get that done while we're down there too. I don't know.
What do you think of the other roommate scenario? He comes back from the trip he was on early, comes back and his whole room is ransacked, but miraculously Brad's isn't ransacked. And he gets the hell out of there. So is there any way to get a hold of that guy somehow? Or?
Possibly, yeah. Morph, we might want to put you on that and see if we can track him down and at least ask him some questions, if not get an interview out of him. I mean, admittedly, he wasn't there the weekend, but if he was living there at the time, he might have some insight into what their relationship was like, what he noticed, how Sharon's involvement was. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And even why there was a police escort. I mean, why did he need a police escort back to the house? Was he told something that Brad might be there, that he was up to something? I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean,
and the house, I guess a little bit of a spoiler, the house essentially gets thrashed by the next time that Judy gets to the house a few weeks later. It has been completely ransacked. It looks like, someone went in and just like literally tore cabinets off the walls, emptied everything all over the floor. It's an insane mess. So we're not at the end of all that story.
And the whole accelerated wedding thing, to me, it just clearly to me seems it's a case of Judy trying to talk Elisa into going slowly, take your time, do it right. There's plenty of time for the wedding to have the one you want. And maybe Elisa goes back to Brad and says, my mom said this and it makes perfect sense. And I could just see him manipulating her. She's been lonely. She's been looking for somebody for a while, and him manipulating her into, no, we've got to do it sooner. We've got to do this. We've got to make that wedding happen. And her putting that wedding dress on and going through with it.
Yeah. But to your guys' point earlier also, if it was such an important thing to her, maybe she's not being that upfront with Judy about how she feels about it, and maybe she would jump at the first chance to walk down the aisle. I could kind of see it going both ways, so it's tough to know. And please keep in mind, for everything that we've heard today, this is Judy's information. This is from Judy's perspective. So things, and we know how strong Judy feels about this is a foul play situation and who she thinks is responsible for it. So things might be colored a little bit in that direction. But we're going to see if we can, if the people will talk to us, we'll talk to them. If we had some way to track Brad down, we certainly would like to get some questions from him, if not a full interview. Let him share his side of this as well. If he's innocent, all it could do is potentially help a family with their grieving process and help them move forward in some way. So Just a quick reminder, because I know about this topic, and we're going to keep including this tag in the episodes because for anyone that is thinking about ending their own life, we want to make sure that you reach out and get some help. Please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. They are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've supported them on my YouTube channel, given them donations a few times. They're a really important mechanism for helping you. You don't have to go through this stuff alone. And of course, if it isn't that urgent, keep BetterHelp in mind too. If you just need some help with maybe finding happiness or steering your life in a bit of a different direction.
It's always good to have somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
Even if it's not somebody you know personally or you're close to, maybe sometimes that's even better because you can let it out and have someone there to hear it and give you some advice.
Absolutely. Gray, you want to tell them about the live stream?
Yeah, we're going to do a live stream on December 18th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Central, and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that'll be on Gray Hughes Investigates. And make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you do not miss the show.
Remember, you can find all the information and links you need for any specific episode together all in one place at www.threemenandamystery.com, and that's with the number 3. And if you have information to help shine the light of truth on this case, please send it in. You can also find a Patreon link there so you can help support our efforts and get some cool perks by joining.
If you have any feedback, corrections, or new details, they can be sent to us via email at threemenandamystery.com. Those are with the number 3 in there. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter. Our handle is at threemenandamystery, or find us on Facebook. If you're looking for another true crime podcast to listen to while you're waiting for the next episode of 3 Men and a Mystery to come out, consider Apple for the Teacher. Here's a sample.
Hello everyone. Let me tell you about the Apple for the Teacher podcast. I'm Anna Thomas, a teacher and your host. So you're probably thinking it's about reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? Well, think again. It's a fresh take on true crime, where you wouldn't expect to find true crime. In schools. Yes, schools. You will hear tragic and shocking stories that I have uncovered in my own profession. You'll hear about murder, abduction, hijack, misconduct, student disappearance, suicide, kidnap and ransom, and much, much more. So if you're looking for something a little different in the true crime genre, then Apple for the Teacher is for you. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. So join me as I present People Behaving Badly, the Bad Apples. Looking forward to seeing you soon, but until then, remember to be a good apple.
3 Men and a Mystery is produced by John Lorden, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes.
Please rate us on the podcasting platform that you found us on and help us grow by telling your friends and family about us.
We are only getting started learning all the details of this case and, of course, about Elisa's life. You do not want to miss the next episode. I'm John Lorden.
This is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we are 3 Men and a Mystery.